Imagine standing at your own son's wedding, dressed in your best, heart full of love, waiting to celebrate the happiest day of his life. You've spent years raising him, guiding him, giving every ounce of yourself so he could have a future brighter than your own. And then, in front of family, friends, and strangers, you're blindsided by the very person who vowed to love him. That's where I found myself. I thought this day would be about unity, about family coming together. Instead, it became the day I learned what betrayal looks like when it wears a white dress. My daughter-in-law didn't just disrespect me. She demanded to take everything I had worked for. She stood there, smiling like a queen, and told me to hand over my house because, in her words, a young family needs it more. I raised my son with all the love I had, and on his wedding day, I expected joy, not humiliation. But what happened next will stay with me forever. This is the story of how greed pushed her to slap me across the face, and how I made one single phone call that changed everything. I arrived at the ceremony with a heart full of pride. The decorations were beautiful, the guests buzzing with excitement. My son looked nervous, but happy. For a moment, I thought this would be the start of a wonderful new chapter. I didn't know then what his bride had planned for me. The morning had already been a swirl of emotions. As I stood in front of my mirror, fixing the final pin in my hair, I caught myself staring longer than usual. The woman looking back at me had lines carved into her face, yes, but every wrinkle carried a story. Of late nights caring for a sick child, of laughter in crowded kitchens, of grief and survival after my husband passed. I had raised my boy alone since then, through lean years and hard winters, making sure he never went without. And today, I was supposed to see the fruit of all that sacrifice, his wedding day. I stepped into the church, and my heart caught in my throat. The place was stunning. White flowers lined the pews. Soft music floated through the air, and the scent of roses clung to every corner. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the light pouring in through stained glass painted colors across the aisle. Guests whispered, smiled, adjusted their suits and dresses. The excitement was contagious, and for a moment I let myself believe this day would be perfect. Then I saw him, my son, standing near the altar, straightening his tie nervously, his best man patting him on the back. His smile was small but genuine, the kind of smile he wore as a child when he was nervous but trying to be brave. He spotted me across the room, and for a second his eyes softened. I smiled back, giving him all the reassurance I could in that one look. My heart swelled. I thought to myself, this is it. He's really grown. My boy is becoming a husband. I found my seat near the front, close enough to see everything, but not in the way. Families were mingling, laughter rippling across the rows. I could hear the clinking of champagne glasses, the rustle of expensive fabrics as people adjusted themselves. I watched as old friends hugged, as relatives leaned in close to gossip, as children fidgeted and were hushed by their mothers. Every detail had been planned to perfection. From the embroidered tablecloths to the grand archway decorated with lilies, it was clear no expense had been spared. The bride's family, wealthy and proud, had made sure this was no ordinary wedding. This was a spectacle. Something to impress. Something to boast about for years. I could feel it in the air. This wasn't just about love. This was about image, about power, about appearances. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside. I wanted to hold on to the joy. I wanted to see only the best in this moment. I clasped my hands together and whispered to myself, just focus on your son. Focus on his happiness. As the music shifted, signaling the procession was about to begin, the crowd hushed. Heads turned, phones lifted discreetly, and all eyes moved toward the back of the aisle. And then she appeared. The bride. She glided down the aisle in a gown that sparkled like frost under the lights. Her veil was long, flowing like a river behind her, carried by two flower girls in matching dresses. People gasped softly at her beauty, and I admit she was breathtaking. She carried herself with confidence, almost too much confidence. The kind that doesn't just say I'm in love, but rather, I've won. Her eyes swept the room as she walked, and when they landed on me, her expression didn't soften. No smile, no warmth, just a flicker of something I couldn't name at the time, a mix of calculation and possession. It was as if she wasn't marrying my son. She was claiming him. I brushed the thought away, blaming my own nerves. But deep down, a shiver passed through me. As she reached the altar, my son took her hand. He looked at her with love so raw it almost hurt me to see it. He had no idea what kind of person she really was. He only saw the beauty, the charm, the promise of a future. And because he loved her, I wanted to love her too. For him, I was willing to try. The ceremony began, filled with scripture, vows, and the usual laughter at small, nervous mistakes. Guests dabbed their eyes, couples held hands, cameras flashed. My son's voice shook as he recited his vows, but every word was filled with sincerity. My heart broke and healed all at once as I listened. I thought, this is it. He's found his happiness. Maybe I've been too harsh in my private judgments. Maybe she will love him the way he deserves. But then, little things began to happen. Small, sharp moments that most wouldn't notice, but I did. When the minister asked if anyone objected, the bride's eyes flickered toward me for the briefest second, a challenging glance, daring me to speak. I didn't. I smiled softly instead, choosing peace over confrontation. When they exchanged rings, her hands lingered, showing off the diamond as though the marriage was less about commitment and more about display. The guests murmured, admiring the sparkle, and she tilted her chin higher, as though their awe was her true vow. And when they kissed, sealing their union, she didn't lean into my son with tenderness. No, she kissed him with the triumph of someone who had conquered, someone who had secured exactly what she wanted. Applause erupted. Cheers filled the hall. The crowd rose to its feet, clapping, celebrating. My son's face glowed with happiness, and I clapped too, forcing myself to hold on to his joy, even as unease began to stir inside me. After the ceremony, as guests filed toward the reception hall, I lingered. I watched my son and his new wife walk hand in hand, her gown sweeping behind her like a queen's train. Cameras flashed, and she posed with every step, smiling not just for the pictures, but for the power she believed she now held. I wanted to shake off the feeling, the gnawing voice whispering inside me that something wasn't right. I told myself, don't ruin this day. He's happy. That's what matters. But as I followed the crowd into the reception, with music swelling and glasses of champagne being poured, the weight in my chest grew heavier. I didn't know then, as I smiled politely and accepted congratulations from distant relatives, that this day, this beautiful, glittering day, would mark the beginning of the cruelest betrayal I had ever faced. And yet, at that moment, I still believed. I believed in my son's happiness, in the promise of family, in the hope that love would guide us all forward. I believed this would be the start of a wonderful new chapter. I didn't know then what his bride had planned for me. After the vows, during the reception, she pulled me aside. With a cold smile, she said, "A young family needs your house more than you." My jaw dropped. She wasn't asking. She was demanding my home, the place where I raised my son, the only piece of security I had left. Guests overheard. Whispers spread like wildfire. I stood there frozen, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses blurring around me. The band was playing a lively tune, people were dancing, and yet in that corner of the hall, time seemed to stop. My chest tightened, my hands trembled slightly, but I refused to let her see me break. For a moment, I thought maybe I had misheard her. Surely she hadn't just said that. Not on her wedding day, not to me. But the look in her eyes erased all doubt. They weren't eyes filled with joy or gratitude. No, they were sharp, calculating, and filled with entitlement. She truly believed my house, The very home I had poured my life into belonged to her now. I steadied myself, clutching the edge of the table behind me, the polished wood digging into my palms. I whispered almost to myself, "My house?" She leaned in closer, her perfume heavy, her smile tighter. "Yes, your house. Don't you think it makes more sense for a young couple to live there? You're alone. What do you need it for?" The words cut deep. Alone. That's what she saw me as. An old woman, a burden, a leftover piece of the past. She didn't see the years of sacrifice, the nights I stayed awake sewing clothes so my son could have new shirts for school, the mornings I worked double shifts to keep the lights on. She didn't see the memories etched into those walls, the photographs still hanging, the echoes of laughter and love that filled every room. To her, it was just property. Something to claim. I felt the blood rush to my face. My lips parted, but for a second, no words came out. My throat tightened. My mind raced. Around us, people began to notice. A few heads turned, eyes flicking in our direction. The bride's voice, though quiet, carried just enough. And then I realized that was her intention. She wanted people to hear. She wanted witnesses. I finally managed to speak. "That's my home, where I raised my son, where my husband and I built a life together. You can't just—" She interrupted me, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. "Of course you can. Families share. And after all, what's the point of you rattling around in that big place all by yourself? It's selfish, really. We could fill it with love, with children, with a real future." Selfish. The word echoed in my head, louder than the music playing across the room. I swallowed hard, but my voice grew steadier. "That house is all I have left. It's mine." The smile slid off her face, replaced with a glare as sharp as broken glass. For a moment, her mask cracked. She wasn't the glowing bride anymore. She was something else. Someone hungry, someone dangerous. And then it happened. A small gasp rippled through the guests nearby. They had heard. I caught the look of one of my cousins, wide-eyed, whispering to her husband. Another woman pressed her hand to her mouth, shaking her head. The whispers spread, moving through the room faster than spilled wine. I could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on me. Some looked horrified, some curious, others entertained. Like this was just another piece of wedding drama to gossip about. My cheeks burned, my heart pounding against my ribs. But I held my ground. I leaned in closer, my voice low but firm. "You will not take my home." Her eyes narrowed, and her voice dropped too, sharp enough to pierce steel. "We'll see about that." The words chilled me to the bone. She wasn't bluffing. She truly believed she could take it. That house, the one thing that had been my anchor through years of loneliness, grief, and sacrifice, was now her prize. I straightened my shoulders and forced myself to breathe. My mind flashed back to the day I first stepped into that house with my husband, young and hopeful, carrying boxes of second-hand furniture and big dreams. I remembered the smell of fresh paint, the sound of my son's laughter as he took his first steps across the living room floor, the way my husband would hum as he fixed the porch swing. Every inch of that house held my life, my history, my heart. And now, here was this woman, my son's bride, trying to snatch it away as if it were nothing more than a piece of paper to sign. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice steady. "That house isn't yours. It will never be yours." She smirked as if amused, and then stepped back, smoothing her gown as though brushing me off. But the damage was done. People had heard, people had seen, and the whispers grew louder, buzzing like angry bees across the hall. My son, oblivious, was laughing with his groomsmen a few tables away, raising his glass for another toast. He hadn't seen the exchange. hadn't heard the venom dripping from his bride's words. And for the first time that day, I felt truly alone in that crowd of hundreds. I forced myself to sit down at my table, my hands shaking as I reached for a glass of water. My throat was dry, my stomach knotted. Around me, I caught fragments of hushed conversations. "Did you hear what she said? She wants her house? Imagine saying that on your wedding day." I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and escape the eyes, the judgment, the pity. But I also felt something else rising inside me. A spark. A fire I hadn't felt in years. Because this wasn't just about a house. This was about respect. About dignity. About the life I had built with my own hands being dismissed like it was worthless. And that I would not allow. As I sat there, forcing a smile for the people who came up to congratulate me, my mind was already turning. I didn't know yet how far she would go, or how cruel the next hours would become. But I knew one thing. She had awakened something in me. A steel resolve I thought I had lost long ago. And while the music played and the newlyweds basked in their moment, I sat quietly, watching, waiting, remembering every word she had said, because she thought she could strip me of my home. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I told her firmly, "No, that house is mine." That's when she slapped me, right there in front of everyone. The music stopped, gasps filled the room, and my son stood frozen. My cheek burned, but my heart burned hotter. I refused to let her humiliate me and walk away with victory. The sound of that slap cracked through the air like a whip. For a split second, silence swallowed the entire reception hall. The violins that had been playing a cheerful tune fell quiet. The chatter of guests died instantly, and every single eye turned toward us. I could feel hundreds of stares pressing against my skin, heavier than the sting still blazing across my face. I stood there, motionless, my hand instinctively rising to my cheek. The heat of her palm still lingered, but it wasn't the physical pain that cut the deepest. It was the audacity, the disrespect, the sheer cruelty of what she had done. This wasn't a private quarrel anymore. She had made a spectacle of me. Gasps echoed through the hall, rippling from table to table. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered against the floor, though no one bent to clean it. All attention was fixed on us. My son, my own boy, stood just a few feet away. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly, but he didn't move. He was paralyzed. Torn between the woman he had just married and the mother who had raised him. His indecision cut deeper than the slap itself. The bride, no, not a bride, but a conqueror basking in her moment of domination, stood tall, her hand still hovering in the air for a second before she lowered it with a slow, deliberate grace. She smiled. Not the radiant smile she had given for the photographs, but a twisted one, sharp and cold, as if she believed she had won. I took a deep breath. My chest rose and fell slowly, deliberately. Every part of me screamed to lash out, to yell, to return the humiliation she had just dealt me. But I didn't. I stood still. I met her eyes, steady and unblinking. That's when the whispers began. Did she just slap her? On her wedding day? She slapped his mother. The voices swirled around me, louder, overlapping, spreading like wildfire. Guests clutched their pearls, hands flew to mouths, heads shook in disbelief. Some looked away, embarrassed to be witnesses. Others leaned forward, hungry for the scandal, as though they were watching a play unfold on stage. I straightened my spine, forcing myself to stand taller despite the tremble in my knees. My voice, when it finally emerged, was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes when fire turns from a flicker to a steady, controlled burn. "You will not take my home," I said again, louder this time for the entire room to hear. Her eyes narrowed, her nostrils flared. She hadn't expected me to stand my ground, not after that slap. She thought I would crumble, that I would bow my head and slink away in shame. But she didn't know me. She didn't know the storms I had weathered, the battles I had already fought and survived. My cheek throbbed, but I refused to lift a hand to it again. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me tend to the wound she inflicted. Then I heard a voice, sharp, male, breaking the silence. "My God! She hit her!" It was my cousin. His words sliced through the tension, and once again, all eyes shifted between me, the bride, and my son. And still, my son did nothing. I looked at him, silently pleading. Not for protection, I didn't need that, but for acknowledgement. For him to recognize the cruelty of what had just happened. But his face was pale, drained of color, caught in some invisible trap between love and loyalty. He opened his mouth as though to speak, but no words came. The bride, emboldened by his silence, took a step closer. "You're being dramatic," she sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "All I asked for was a house. A house you don't even need." Laughter, nervous, awkward, rippled from somewhere in the back of the hall, quickly stifled when others glared. I clenched my fists at my sides. The audacity, the arrogance, the entitlement, it burned hotter than the sting on my cheek. This woman thought she could strip me of dignity and claim my life's work in the same breath. I leaned forward, my voice low, but clear enough that even those in the farthest corners could hear. "You struck me on the day you vowed to love my son. Remember this moment. Remember the shame you've brought upon yourself." The crowd erupted into whispers again. Some nodded at my words, others exchanged glances heavy with disapproval. I could feel the shift in the air, the tide turning against her. Where moments ago she stood triumphant, now the weight of judgment bore down on her shoulders. She glanced around, her confident mask faltering as she saw faces no longer filled with admiration, but with disgust, and yet she still tried to hold on to her illusion of power. She lifted her chin, forcing a smile, and said, "This is my wedding day. You're not going to ruin it with your bitterness." Bitterness. That word hit me harder than the slap, as though all my years of sacrifice, all the nights I stayed awake to care for her husband, my son, were nothing but jealousy and spite in her eyes. I felt my heart clench, but at the same time, it hardened. Because I knew then, she wasn't going to stop. She wasn't going to change. And if she was willing to slap me in front of the world on her wedding day, there was nothing she wouldn't try to take later. The music still hadn't resumed. The band sat in silence, their instruments resting awkwardly in their laps, waiting for a signal. The hall felt heavy, suffocating, every second stretching longer than the last. Finally, my son moved. He stepped forward, reaching out as if to touch his bride's arm, but then he hesitated, withdrawing his hand halfway. His eyes darted between us, his mother humiliated but unbroken, and his wife defiant and shaking beneath the weight of the crowd's judgment. "Stop," he whispered hoarsely. But it was too late. The damage had been done. I locked eyes with him, silently telling him what my voice couldn't say in that moment. I love you. I always will. But you are blind, and one day you'll see what she really is." And then I turned back to her. Her lips curled into a smile once more, but this one didn't reach her eyes. She leaned in, just enough so that only I could hear. "This isn't over." The chill of her words slithered through me like ice. I took a deep breath, lifting my chin. Out loud, for everyone to hear, I said, "No, it isn't." And with that, I stepped back, refusing to let tears fall, refusing to let the sting of that slap define me. The music started again, hesitant at first, then stronger, as though trying to patch over the fracture that had split the celebration in two. Guests shuffled uncomfortably, trying to pretend nothing had happened, but I knew better. That moment would not be forgotten. Not by me, not by them, not by her, and especially not by my son. Because while my cheek burned with the mark of her hand, my heart burned hotter with a resolve she could never break. She thought the slap was the end of the fight. But for me, it was only the beginning. I picked up my phone, dialed a number I knew by heart, and spoke calmly. 20 minutes later, the doors opened. 2 men walked in. Their presence was powerful, commanding. The bride's face drained of color. She clutched my son's arm, stammering, begging. For the first time, she realized she had gone too far. But let me take you back to the moment I made that call. After the slap, after the humiliation, after the whispers had spread like fire through dry grass, I stood at my table, hands trembling. My cheek still burned, but not as fiercely as the fire in my chest. Around me, guests tried to return to their meals, but the air in that reception hall was heavy with unease. Forks clinked softly against plates, conversations faltered, laughter rang hollow. I sat in silence, staring at the glass of water in front of me, and then, slowly, I reached for my purse. My fingers closed around my phone, the familiar weight steadying me. I scrolled to the number I knew would change everything, a number I had dialed only in moments of absolute need. When the line clicked, I didn't speak with anger. I didn't yell or weep. My voice was steady, controlled, sharp as glass. "It's time," I said. That was all. Nothing more was needed. On the other end, there was no hesitation, only a brief pause, and then a calm reply. "We'll be there." I hung up, slipped the phone back into my purse, and folded my hands neatly in my lap. Outwardly, I must have looked calm, but inside my heart was pounding like a drum, each beat louder than the last. The bride noticed. She tilted her head, her smirk faltering for the first time. "Who did you call?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but her voice was laced with suspicion. I didn't answer. I simply smiled. Minutes crawled by. The band played again. Guests tried to dance, but the joy had drained from the room. I could feel eyes still on me, still on her, the story of the slap echoing in every whispered conversation. Then, 20 minutes later, the doors opened. They didn't slam, they didn't creak. They simply opened, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. 2 men entered, dressed sharply, not in uniforms, not in casual suits, but in a way that spoke of quiet authority. They weren't bulky or loud. They didn't need to be. The way they carried themselves, shoulders squared, eyes sharp, was enough. The room stilled. The music faltered again. Guests paused mid-bite, mid-sentence, mid-dance, turning to watch these strangers who seemed to command the very air around them. And then I saw it. The bride's face drained of color. Her painted smile collapsed. She gripped my son's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes darted between the men and me, realization dawning. "No!" she whispered, barely audible. "No, you didn't!" She tugged on my son's sleeve, stammering. Who are they? Why are they here? Tell them to leave." Her voice cracked, her confidence shattered. My son looked bewildered, his eyes darting from his trembling wife to the 2 men approaching with steady, purposeful strides. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked. I didn't move. I didn't speak yet. I let the weight of the moment hang in the air, let her feel the crushing pressure of her own actions closing in. The bride tried to stand taller, tried to put on her mask of arrogance once more, but her body betrayed her. Her hands shook. Her lips trembled. She pressed herself closer to my son, whispering frantically, "Make them go away. Please. Please." The 2 men stopped just a few feet from our table. Their presence was like a storm cloud rolling into the room, quiet, heavy, undeniable. One of them looked at me and gave the faintest nod. That was all. The bride's knees seemed to weaken. She lowered herself into her chair, clinging to my son as though he could shield her. What are they doing here?" she whispered again, her voice high, panicked. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself to speak with authority, not just to her, but to everyone within earshot. "You thought you could take everything from me," I said, my voice calm, steady, yet carrying across the room. "You thought you could humiliate me and walk away untouched. But you forgot one thing. I am not alone." Gasps rippled through the hall again. Guests leaned forward, riveted, unable to look away. The bride shook her head furiously. "This isn't fair. You're trying to ruin my wedding. You can't do this." But her words sounded hollow now, brittle, desperate. The men didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their very presence was enough to unravel her arrogance. My son looked from me to them. Confusion etched across his face. "Mom, who are they?" I met his gaze, my eyes softening just slightly. "People who protect what's mine," I said, the bride's voice cracked. I didn't mean it, okay? It was a joke. I was just teasing about the house." She forced a laugh, but it rang false, thin, brittle. No one believed her. The whispers began again, this time filled with judgment, with pity. Not for me, but for her. She had shown her true self, and now, under the weight of her own choices, she crumbled. She grabbed my son's hands, tears streaking her makeup. "You believe me, don't you? Tell me you believe me." But my son said nothing. He just stared, torn apart, his world cracking in two. And for the first time that day, I saw her mask shatter completely. The woman who had walked down the aisle with confidence, who had demanded my home with arrogance, who had slapped me with cruelty. Now she was trembling, begging, broken. And I sat there, calm, resolute, knowing she had finally realized the truth. She had gone too far. The men weren't strangers. They were family lawyers and close friends. They had documents ready. I revealed that the house had already been secured under my name with protections she could never touch. Her tears flowed, her arrogance crumbled, and the room watched as her plan collapsed before her eyes. She had wanted to strip me of dignity, but instead she lost hers. But let me tell you how it unfolded. When the two men entered, the bride's mask of confidence slipped, but she didn't yet understand just how deep her mistake had been. To the guests, they may have looked like quiet professionals, but to me, they were more than that. They were my allies, my protectors, people who had stood by me through some of the hardest times of my life. I had known for years that I couldn't trust just anyone with my future. My late husband and I had worked too hard for everything we had built. The house, the savings, the life we had carved out from nothing. We had talked about it endlessly. "What if someone tries to take advantage of you after I'm gone?" he'd asked. And so, with his wisdom guiding me, I made sure everything was locked down. And now, on this night, at this wedding, that decision would save me. The taller of the two men reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The sound of paper sliding against paper seemed to echo louder than the music, louder than the whispers, louder than the bride's frantic pleas. He placed it gently on the table before me, his movements deliberate, precise, like a ritual. The bride leaned forward, desperate, her voice breaking. "What is that? What are you doing? This isn't your moment. This is my wedding." Her voice wavered, shrill, edged with hysteria. I didn't rush. I opened the folder slowly, letting the tension stretch out, every eye in the room fixed on me. I flipped through the neatly organized pages, then turned one around for her to see. "These," I said, my voice calm but firm, "are legal documents. Proof that the house you so shamelessly demanded from me, the home I built, the walls that raised my son, is beyond your reach." Her eyes darted over the page, though I doubted she absorbed a single word. She shook her head violently, smearing her makeup with the back of her hand as tears began to spill. "No, that can't be. You can't do this to me. That house should be ours, not yours." I leaned back, my gaze unwavering. That house will never be yours. I secured it long ago under protections you could never dream of unraveling. I made sure it would stay in my name, safe, untouchable. I saw women like you coming from a mile away." Gasps rippled across the room. Guests exchanged wide-eyed looks, their curiosity now fully sharpened into judgment. The whispers weren't about me anymore. They were about her. Her arrogance, the smugness she wore when she first demanded my home, crumbled into dust before their eyes. She had humiliated me with a slap, tried to paint me as selfish, tried to steal the roof over my head. And now she was exposed. The lawyers remained silent, standing tall, their very presence lending gravity to every word I spoke. One of them tapped the document meaningfully, the sound sharp, final. "This house," he said in a steady voice, "is legally secured. No spouse, no family member, no outsider can touch it. Any attempt to seize it would fail in court instantly." Her lip quivered. She turned to my son, clutching his arm with desperation. "You believe me, right? You know I was only trying to make a better future for us. Tell her she's being cruel. Tell her she should give us the house." My son's face was pale, his eyes distant. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any words could have been. Her tears came faster now. She pressed her hands to her face, smearing black mascara down her cheeks. "You can't embarrass me like this. Not here, not in front of everyone, please. Please, don't do this." But it wasn't me doing it. It was her. Her own arrogance, her own greed, her own cruelty, those had been the architects of her downfall. I looked at her, not with anger, but with an icy clarity. "You wanted to strip me of my dignity tonight. You thought you could shame me, steal from me, and walk away with a victory. But instead, you've revealed yourself for who you really are. And in trying to take everything from me, you've lost the one thing you valued most, your pride." She sobbed harder, her body trembling as though the very ground beneath her had given way. The guests didn't comfort her. They didn't rush to her side. They sat in silence, watching her unravel. Some shook their heads in disapproval. Others whispered words I couldn't quite catch, but I knew they weren't kind. One older woman, seated near the front, leaned toward her husband and murmured loud enough for others to hear. "Imagine slapping his mother and demanding her house on her wedding day. What kind of bride does that?" And just like that, the tide of public opinion had turned. She wasn't the victim. She wasn't the radiant bride anymore. She was the villain of her own wedding. The lawyers closed the folder and slid it back into the briefcase. Their job was done. They didn't need to say another word. I, however, wasn't finished. I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to make her strain to hear me, but not so low that the nearest guests couldn't catch every syllable. "This house isn't just bricks and wood. It's my history. It's my husband's memory. It's the life I poured into raising a son who, until today, I thought knew better than to stand by silently while his wife humiliated me. You may think you've won him, but tonight you've lost so much more than a house." Her eyes widened, the weight of my words pressing down on her like a stone. She had walked into this marriage believing she could manipulate, control, and conquer. But tonight she had been stripped bare, exposed before her husband, before her family, before every single guest who had once celebrated her. Her tears flowed freely now, soaking into the white of her dress. Her shoulders shook with sobs, her voice reduced to broken pleas. "Please, stop. Please don't do this to me." But I sat back, my dignity restored, my pride intact. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge beyond this. The truth had been enough, and the truth had destroyed her. The men weren't strangers. They were family lawyers and close friends. They had documents ready. I revealed that the house had already been secured under my name with protections she could never touch. Her tears flowed, her arrogance crumbled, and the room watched as her plan collapsed before her eyes. She had wanted to strip me of dignity, but instead she lost hers. That night, I left the wedding with my head held high. I didn't storm out. I didn't shout or demand the last word. I simply walked away, dignity intact, my truth unshaken. I didn't need revenge through anger. I had justice through preparation. The whispers of the guests followed me to the door. Some looked at me with admiration, others with disbelief, but none could deny what they had witnessed. A woman who refused to be broken, who refused to surrender what was hers. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this. Family may betray you, people you love may disappoint you, but when you stand your ground, when you protect what matters, the truth always wins. As for my daughter-in-law, she will never forget the day her greed backfired, the day her arrogance turned to shame, the day she learned that not everything, and certainly not everyone, could be bought, bullied, or stolen. And me? I walked away not just with my house, not just with my pride, but with the unshakable knowledge that I had won, not through cruelty, but through strength.